The Answer.
Good morning, Dan and Amy. So when the news broke yesterday that there was a Islamist terrorist attack in Barcelona, 13 dead at the time. Now it's up
14 dead.
Right? More than 100 injured, several gravely injured.
And people from 34 different countries. And Americans were there, but so far we haven't learned of any Americans who have been injured.
And this was a truck attack, right? Crowded tourist area, 34 countries. And this individual just mowing down people.
Going 70 miles per hour.
As many people as he could. 3 people in custody, 2 Moroccans and one Spanish national. The driver still at large.
Yeah, he's 18-year-old Musa.
Who cares what his name
Okabar or
is?
whatever. But his brother, who's 28, is in police custody, and he's the one who rented the vehicle.
Or he claims, I thought, that his identification was stolen by his brother to rent the vehicle. But
yeah,
that,
but there's a
that will
second
get
vehicle
fleshed
that
out.
they rented, and so they're still looking for the driver and this other vehicle.
And then there was a thwarted terrorist attack in Cambrils, a resort town about 70 miles from Barcelona.
Yeah, and this is crazy because 5 terrorists were wearing fake suicide belts, and they did ram a car into one woman died, and a police officer was injured, but they got out of the car, and police just nailed them in a hail of gunfire, and all 5 are dead.
So that was stopped in the resort town. Obviously, the attack in Barcelona not stopped. The primary terrorist, Islamist terrorist, is at large. And of course, you hear the story, and you what does it call to mind? Calls to mind all these other attacks that have been in other European cities, very similar, that have been committed by Islamofascists, like these individuals in
And
London,
Stockholm and
right?
London,
Nice, right?
Berlin.
Or it could even call to mind, since it's Spain, you think, oh gosh, it reminds me of the March 2004 train bombings right before the election, when the Spanish people then, of course, voted for the Socialist Surrender Party, which was a curious choice. But regardless, that 2004 bombing, more than 200 people killed.
It was awful.
Right?
Yeah.
Or it may call to mind something else if you work for CNN.
And it's something that not just Spanish authorities, but U.S. authorities have been aware of. But the final point I would make, Wolf, is just this note that in light of the uproar of the last several days, 5 days apart, you have white supremacists in Charlottesville use a vehicle to kill, and here you have attackers, at least following the modus operandi of terrorists, using vehicles apparently to kill as well. And it's those shared tactics that should be alarming.
Yeah, and there will be questions about copycats. There will be questions if what happened in Barcelona was at all a copycat version of what happened in Charlottesville, Virginia, even though there may be different characters, different political ambitions. They use the same killing device, a vehicle going at high speed into a large group of pedestrians.
There has been so much hand-wringing this week about President Trump and his inappropriate moral equivalences, and I have made my own case against them. Mm-hmm. And now you have one, Wolf Blitzer, suggesting that Barcelona was a copycat of Charlottesville. He's not familiar with the other 5 attacks in European cities just this year of a similar nature, with similar tactics, all radical Islam.
If anything,
nature.
Charlottesville was a copycat of what ISIS has been doing.
And so that's only part of it. The other part of it is the false equivalence between the threat white supremacy and terrorism associated with white supremacy poses to liberty in the West and the threat Islamofascists pose. Those are the same order of magnitude threats. That's what CNN is implying. Everything relates back to Charlottesville. You got to, hey, Wolf, Jim Sciutto, my national correspondent, find a way to get it back to Charlottesville. Find a way to blame Trump for the Barcelona attack, if you can, as a kicker. For more on the topic, we're pleased to be joined by our friend Colonel Cedric Leighton. He's a military intelligence expert and security consultant who has served both on the Joint Chiefs of Staff as well as the National Security Council. Colonel Leighton, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Good morning, Dan. Good to be with you.
So, your reaction to the Barcelona attack, both the truck attack as well as the thwarted attack in that resort town, and is Barcelona, like London, like Paris, like Nice, like Stockholm, another European city of significance that has allowed an internal problem to metastasize?
Well, I think that's definitely the case. When you look at what happened in London, Stockholm, Berlin, Nice, and the other European cities, and you compare it with Barcelona, it's pretty clear that the tactics used were similar. And it follows ISIS's view and direction that if you don't have a bomb, you take a gun. If you don't have a gun, you take a knife. If you don't have a knife, you take a truck. And that's what they're doing. They're running out of weapons, except for the ones that are readily available for normal people to use in their everyday lives. And basically anything can be made into a weapon. But they have picked one of the things that we use in our daily lives as a pretty effective weapon, and that weapon, of course, being vehicles, in this case, trucks.
This may sound crazy, but is there any way car companies can do a better job screening people who are trying to rent large white vehicles?
Well, actually, that's not so crazy at all, Amy. Yes, I would say the answer is yes. And now what it would require is an interface between police authorities, the customs people in various countries, and the rent-a-car companies. So, yes, it would absolutely be possible to do that. The question then is, how do you work that, or is there a way in which you could disable a vehicle when you get indications that they're going to go into an area that may cause damage to pedestrians, like Las Ramblas in Barcelona.
Yeah.
So there are technical ways to do it. There are, in essence, what you'd be talking about is, if you don't do the controls that we talked about, with the border people and with the police forces, you could have a kill switch in a car. And that might be something that, if you get indications that a car is moving at a high rate of speed in an area where you're not supposed to be doing that, and where you're talking, anything above 50 miles an hour in a pedestrian zone, that would be a key indicator. Of course, that would require real-time intelligence, real-time following of vehicles, and it would be something that you'd have to use artificial intelligence, as they call it, to do that. But it can technically be done, and would be a bit of an issue for the tech companies to work. But yes, there are ways to do that.
Oh. Yeah, the driverless car era, sort of an iteration of that. But boy, but that poses all kinds of
Invasion of privacy
complications.
issues.
Well, I mean, but the flip side is, if you did it on the screening side, it would take about 3 seconds before car companies were facing lawsuits for racial profiling.
Well, that's one of the problems that you'd have. You'd have to, find a way in which to, give them less capable vehicles, or, something that, where there are tracking devices installed on them. So, you have to be careful with it, obviously, but, because you don't want to evoke the image of a police state on the one hand, but on the other hand, you want to protect innocent people. So there is always a compromise to be made with things, but there are, some very, difficult choices that people have to make, and it becomes clear that there are going to be, I think, some compromises that either rental car companies will have to make, or the authorities will find a way to work with them to help prevent these kinds of things.
Something simple, like a background check, though. I mean, I just recently rented a 9-passenger van in Stockholm and then in Nuremberg, Germany, and they didn't even look at my passport. They didn't even, nothing. A driver's license. I mean, I made the phone call from here months ago, but it's just strange that nothing was scrutinized. I mean, I don't know if it's because I'm blonde.
No, you're right.
But who knows?
You're right. There are certain ways, Amy, in which they could certainly up the scrutiny, and maybe you didn't fit the profile that they were looking for. If you don't, but that is that is always something that should be done. There should be scrutiny to make sure that people are who they say they are, because ISIS is known to try to get into organizations and to have people work for them who either don't know that they're working for them or who look like they don't work for them, and that's always a key factor.
Yeah, but it seems to me that fundamentally here we're talking about a culture problem, and we're talking about a culture problem where you've got countries and cities that have a fifth column action occurring against them in real time. And so, yeah, some of these technological advances and intelligence advances to try and stop, of course, these massive attacks and the loss of life. But when it comes to the discussion, we got to have people assimilate. You can't have these no-go zones and so forth. The recommendations with respect to culture, whether it's the schooling or the particular houses of worship, if it becomes known that they are incubators of criminal activity, what can be done and should be considered culturally to advance this notion of assimilation that is often bandied about, but there's not a lot done in furtherance of it?
Yeah, it becomes a real difficult issue, and the only way that you can get people to integrate into a society is if you catch them at the very beginning of the process. You don't want them to be alienated as they come into a country, and it's also a factor of age. Older people are often, of a certain age at least, are less likely to change their views based on what they see than younger people are. So there are those factors, but certainly young people that come into a country, usually with their parents, sometimes without. The key thing is to bring them into society that they're joining or that they hope to join in a way that allows them to see hope, and that's a key question. Are they going to be allowed to achieve their dreams? Are they going to be allowed to at least have a minimum amount of job security or educational possibilities, just like everybody else? If their playing field is equal and it's based on talent, then they have a better chance. But of course, there are also linguistic challenges. It's a lot rougher, I think, in Europe, with some of these things for some of the people coming into these countries than it is in the United States, just because we are better at integrating people into our society. We're not perfect by any means, but we're certainly better at it than some of the other countries have been.
Yeah. He is Colonel Cedric Leighton, military intelligence expert, security consultant, who previously served on both the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the National Security Council. Colonel Leighton, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Always, Dan. Always a
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
You've made this